In the last couple of weeks, you have probably heard me use the term management by optics, and I've used this term to refer to the handling of coronavirus by Donald Trump and the administration. And I've also applied it to Mike Pence and Donald Trump's non-use of masks during recent public appearances. And there's now a new report from the Associated Press, excellent article, which says that indeed, according to people close to Trump, not authorized to speak about this, Trump is refusing to wear a mask in public because, number one, he believes he would look ridiculous wearing one. And number two, and this is the more interesting piece, he believes it'll hurt his chances at being reelected because of the message that wearing a mask would send. And we'll get to that report in a second. So one example of management by optics is the case numbers and the death numbers are a disaster. We've been in these sort of rolling patchworks of stay-at-home orders now for close to 2 months, and the numbers are terrible. Every day we're finding around 25,000 new cases of coronavirus, despite testing not having increased that dramatically or much at all over the last half month or so. We had spikes once again this week to 2,500 deaths on multiple days during the week. So the way that Trump is managing by optics is simply not talking about deaths and cases. Manage the optics, which are say that we won. Talk about these heroic warriors, which are the Americans Trump is talking about. Talk about how we are now getting to reopen the economy, and 30 states or whatever the number they claim is are starting to reopen their state economies. Mike Pence didn't wear a mask when he went to the Mayo Clinic recently, and he was excoriated for it, ended up wearing a mask on his next visit out. But again, it's the optics of, if you say things are going really well, if you say we're past the peak, if you say we've won, if you say we are now in the recovery mode, you certainly can't be seen wearing a mask for the first time in public. That would imply things are not as good as you claim they are. So that gets us to Donald Trump. Earlier this week, Donald Trump flew out to Arizona. We covered it, covered some of his live events there. He went literally to a mask factory, a factory, repurposed facility of Honeywell, where they are making masks. And they have right on the wall on a TV, it says mandatory masks, keep a mask on at all times. Trump didn't wear a mask. And once again, we suspected, based on what we know about Trump, that this is more management by optics. Trump wearing a mask when he says we've basically won, we're past it, we're reopening, it's all great. He succeeded at keeping the death toll well below 2 million. It doesn't send the right signal. And indeed, that's exactly what the new report says. Trump believes that if he was seen wearing a mask, it would hurt his chances of reelection. It would make him look ridiculous. Trump has said to advisors that wearing a mask would, quote, send the wrong message, and it would make him seem preoccupied with health. For me, it would be good. I would love to see Trump preoccupied with health. That's the problem. The problem is he seems not to care about health. Trump also has told confidants, according to the same Associated Press report, that he fears he would look ridiculous in a mask and that the image of him wearing a mask would be used in negative ads against him. Understand the insanity of that. The mask has become a proxy political statement at this point in time. If you wear a mask, it means you believe this is serious, you believe things are bad, you believe people should be scared. Not wearing a mask means you don't trust these hoaxer governors, or everything's fine, or the economy will soon be open, and people will soon or have already stopped dying from coronavirus. It's now a political statement, something that is just supposed to be a matter of science. It's just supposed to be a matter of health. The masks are worn for very empirical, demonstrable reasons. Now they have become political calculations. And I hate to tell you, maybe Trump is making the right calculation for his followers. Seeing Trump wear a mask to somebody like me would say, Trump understands the science. Trump trusts the experts. Trump cares about other people. But Trump is the guy who looked directly at a solar eclipse, and he's making the equivalent choice here with the masks. Now, I have to tell you, the looking ridiculous thing, this is not a show that focuses on things like the physical appearance of our elected officials, but Trump saying the mask will make me look ridiculous. Trump has been going around with a lunatic looking fake tan for years. He walks around in these oversized suits very often. Even if we grant the concern about looking ridiculous with the mask and how that might affect his supporters or whatever, Trump regularly looks ridiculous. And so that is also sort of a complicated thing to get a sense of. But it's not the most important thing. The most important thing here is the continued management by optics and the really sad reality that when it comes to his followers, he may be right. His followers may see him wearing a mask and actually be turned off by it. And unfortunately, when Trump's followers see him not wearing a mask, it encourages them not to wear one, which leads to viral spread, which leads to cases, which leads to deaths. It's very, very ugly. Management by optics, extraordinarily dangerous. And we're seeing that in action. Look at the case numbers in these states. Look at what's happening in Texas. Look at what's happening in Georgia, Arizona, states that are reopening early. It's not good, and it's getting worse. And now Donald Trump is proactively saying, no, I'm not going to be seen with a mask. That'll be used in ads. There is news that is pushing the virus closer to Donald Trump himself. The president has a bunch of what are called valets. They're sort of like personal assistants in a lot of ways. And these are some of the closest people to presidents of the United States. They're often from the U.S. Navy. They deal with food, drink when Trump is at the residence, when Trump is traveling. They cater to the needs of the first family in many cases. These are people that are really close to the president physically, and often they are close in a relationship sense as well. One of Donald Trump's personal valets has tested positive for coronavirus. The valet started having symptoms Wednesday morning, tested positive, and Donald Trump was notified about this. We know that the virus can take 2 to 14 days from infection to symptoms. It's an average of 5 days before you show symptoms. And presumably this is a valet that has continued to be in close contact with Donald Trump. The White House has not said that the valet was not around Donald Trump. So based on how this administration works, we probably can assume that the valet was around Donald Trump during this time. The White House continues not to enforce social distancing for staffers. Reports are that very few people at the White House are wearing masks. Valets are not wearing masks. The physical distance is not being adhered to very strictly at the White House. Now, here's my question for you, and I really want to think this through. If Trump was tested right away when the valet tested positive, Trump was tested once again. If Trump tested positive for coronavirus, but he didn't immediately need to go to a hospital, for example, would they admit it? Would they say that the president has tested positive? There's a North Korea-like gist to this administration where I don't know that they would admit that the great orange leader in this case has tested positive. I also, and this is a different story, but I also would not put it outside the realm of possibility that Trump and Pence have been prophylactically receiving antibody transfusions, the convalescent plasma. You're talking about the president and the vice president. It wouldn't be crazy. It's not even like, oh my God, they're receiving. It would actually just seem almost like that seems relatively safe, and it seems to be effective at treating or dealing with the virus when people have it. It wouldn't be completely out of this world to think maybe Trump and Pence have been getting prophylactic transfusions. But the real story is, has Donald Trump been exposed? What are the results of Donald Trump's test? Has he been taking chloroquine prophylactically as he advocated for a while? My guess is the answer is no. And right away, when this news was released about the valet testing positive, rumors started spreading that Trump went silent on Twitter yesterday because he had the virus. I don't think so. He didn't tweet much for part of the day. Then he was right back on Twitter, tweeting very, very aggressively. The most important thing is to follow up about, once again, we talked about it earlier, management by optics. Trump is not wearing a mask because he says it'll make him look ridiculous. He may be hurt in his reelection campaign if he is seen wearing a mask. Same thing applies to this. If it became known that Donald Trump had coronavirus, would his followers change their minds about Donald Trump being this big, strong, trustworthy guy? I actually think it might be a positive thing in the sense of, I'm not saying I want Trump to get the virus, but I do believe that some of the people that follow Trump, who love Trump, who see him as a demigod, if they found out that Trump had coronavirus, they might start wearing masks. They might start adhering to social distancing guidelines. They might actually start taking this more seriously. But in terms of would the Trump administration admit that Trump has the virus if it didn't require him going to the hospital? I don't know. I'm curious to see what you think. We have a fantastic program for you today. Remember, you can sign up for the all new David Pakman Show newsletter on our website, davidpakman.com. It will soon be morphed into a print digest version of the David Pakman Show coming up in the next couple of weeks. It's free. Sign up at davidpakman.com. Also, let me know what you think about this Trump coronavirus testing thing. Would they admit Trump has the virus if it didn't require him to go to the hospital? Let me know on Twitter. I am dpakman on Twitter.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show depends on your support, and the easiest way is through membership, which includes the world-famous bonus show, as well as commercial-free audio and video streams of the show just for members. Sign up today at joinpakman.com. Coupon code saves you 40%. Vote soon 18.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome back to the show. Today's new members of the day are Orion Aarons and Shane Proler. Orion and Shane, thank you for your support. Also, a big thank you to Charles Parmigiani, who has been a member for almost 5 years and is today's longtime sustaining member of the day. It's been a while, Charles. I really appreciate that support. Let's go to the phones and see if our phone system is functioning at 617-830-4750. Let me go first to our caller from the 651 area code. Who is calling today from 651?
Hi, David. Is this me?
Yes, it is.
Hi, this is Mike from the Twin Cities, Minnesota. Big fan of your show. So my question to you today is, as I'm sure you've heard, there's been like some conservative infighting going on between the traditional branches of conservatism like Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk, and a more like right-wing nationalistic form of conservatism, basically neo-Nazis, mostly led by a guy named Nick Fuentes.
Right.
And and a lot of people on the left are saying like, oh, look, like it's funny, like, look, there's this infighting, no unity among the right. But I'm a little worried about it because from my perspective, it doesn't seem like it's just harmless infighting. It seems like the right is actually consolidating behind Nick Fuentes, and he's siphoning off support from traditional conservatism.
Let me ask you a question. What percentage of this country do you believe knows who Nick Fuentes is?
Well, right now, not that high, but when you go online, he's a very, very popular figure.
Right,
I think
I
he's going to get
understand
more
that. I
popular.
think here's my view on this. I think this is not a perfect analogy by any means, but in the same way that if you just pay attention to Twitter and Reddit, you probably had the impression during the Democratic primary that Bernie's support was dramatically higher than what it really ended up being in the primary. A lot of these slivers of the right are essentially unknown in popular culture outside of certain enclaves. And in fact, there are tons of people in my audience who are involved in the online political space who also have no idea who Nick Fuentes is. I mean, I know who he is, but I don't follow him in any way. So I understand the concern, and there's no doubt that if support on the right starts to consolidate around movements like that, it would be a very, very scary thing. Right now, I don't think it's going on. Now, that doesn't mean it won't happen, and that doesn't mean we don't need to be worried about it. But I think that we really don't want to overstate the power of these movements when it doesn't deserve to be overstated.
That's a good point. But I guess my bigger question was, what can the left strategy be? Because what I've noticed is that a lot of these people are anti-capitalist, and they advocate for a lot of the same positions that we on the left for, free college, free healthcare, but only for white people, like Nick Fuentes himself. So, and we've seen that in Europe too. So how does the left respond to that?
Well, so
Respond to
one
those
thing
arguments?
is, I don't know that the left has to respond to fights that right now are mostly within the right. I actually think it's smarter for the left to stay out of it completely and let them destroy themselves or weaken themselves to the extent that they will. If at a certain point, though, it goes more mainstream, which I think is what your concern is, then the left will
Yeah.
have to put together a strategy. Now, if you check out my clip from earlier this week, populism may be destroying social democracy. I think part of it is the left shouldn't get pulled in to exclusively populist rhetoric, which can be repurposed, as you're pointing out, by bad actors. Like, for example, free college for everyone, except as long as you're white. We want to stick with the policy-based approach of social democracy, but that's going to be a bigger question for the future.
All right. Great. Well, thank you for taking my call, David.
Appreciate the call. Great to hear from you. Let's go next to Tim from the 631. It's been a few months since I heard from argumentative Tim, as we have him in our call system. What's going on, Tim?
Oh, that's my nickname now, huh, David?
Yep.
Well, good to hear from you. I've been following you for quite some time. I follow a lot of people for quite some time. And I wanted to get your take on, the current status of the rollout of opening businesses and what your take is on the Dallas woman that recently got arrested and sent to jail for opening her business while they're at the same time letting criminals out on the street. I think it's very counterproductive.
I don't know anything about that story in Dallas. I just have not seen it or read about it, but I'll check it out. I mean, here's my take,
Yeah.
Tim. My sense is that there are states that have numbers that justify safe, socially distancing reopening of some elements of the economy. We're starting to see the numbers improve in a bunch of different states, and I want the economy reopened as quickly as is safely possible. So that's fantastic. Sure. On the other hand, I'm also seeing some states where the cases are exploding. Texas is an example where 10 days ago they had about 400 to 600 new cases a day. Now Texas has 800 to 1,200 new cases a day. So I have no special insight. I'm just looking at the data and listening to health experts. It seems there are states that aren't yet ready.
Well, a lot of those numbers, when it comes to more people getting it and more people being asymptomatic, is actually good news. And if you have a higher mortality rate, we've actually broken the curve, especially in places where I'm from, New York. I have family out there. It seems to be kind of breaking the fever, as it were. It's not as bad as it once was.
Well, the thing I think, Tim, what's important to look at, though, is a lot of these states have very low testing rates. So I'll give you one example and see if this resonates with you. In Massachusetts, we test at about 3.5 times the rate of Texas. And we used to always have more new cases in Massachusetts than in Texas. That's reversed. And for a couple of days in the last week, Texas had more new cases than Massachusetts, despite only testing at about 30% of the level of Massachusetts. So that's one thing I would certainly look at. The other is the deaths are not based on testing. So when you look at the actual deaths, those are also spiking in Texas. So I think, your point is well taken. But when you see death spiking as well, that's not about testing rates.
What we're seeing right now, I think, is a very big rise in authoritarianism. So the Dallas woman I described, she was actually told on video, and this is all over Fox. This is one of the biggest news stories in the United States. I'm not sure how you haven't seen it. But when it comes to the judge, he was a leftist judge that tweeted with her, "You will apologize and bend the knee unless I will take you to jail if you don't." And she didn't, which I'm happy for her. But that's the type of power grabbing we're seeing in the United States right now, and it's absolutely unacceptable, and it goes against people's rights. And I would sure you would agree as a liberal, either classical liberal or otherwise, it's going against our constitutional rights on a huge scale.
Wait, hold on. What goes against whose constitutional right and which right?
Being able to feed their families. People being able to feed their families based off of fear that's not backed by credible numbers, that's not backed by facts. We're taking stuff from the CDC where 1 minute they're saying that, who by the way, is 30% funded by China.
Wait a second, hold on a second.
It's okay to wear a mask. It's not okay to wear a mask.
Tim, you got to slow down.
Trump doesn't wear a mask. Pence doesn't wear a mask. but
Tim, we
everyone
gotta
else
go.
needs to wear it in the
We
height of
got
the
to go piece
pandemic.
by piece here, Tim. We got to go. I want to really understand what you're saying. So, which constitutional right is violated by a stay-at-home public health guideline?
Illegal search and seizure. There's plenty of them.
Hold on a
David.
second.
There's
If
police,
there's a, how
there's a
does
police,
this, Tim?
there's
You got to
police.
stop though. You got to stop, Tim. What search and seizure happens when people are told you should stay home and wear a mask in public? What's the search and seizure?
Okay, someone's at a park. They get arrested by the police, like the woman in Idaho. Then they search her vehicle. Is that illegal?
You're all over the place, Tim. We're not talking about that. My question was,
I'm all over
what
the
is
place,
the
Paxman.
search and seizure?
Oh, so they search her car in their property and take her kids after
That wasn't
they
my
arrest
question,
her
Tim.
for being
That
in a
wasn't my
public park.
question. That wasn't my question.
That's
My
against the
question
Fourth
is,
Amendment.
what about a stay-at-home order is an anti-constitutional illegal search and seizure?
Okay, so when you don't stay at home and go to a place like a public park where your tax dollars pay for, and then they arrest you there because you're not apparently supposed
Is the park
to be
open
there.
or closed? Hold on. Is the park open? Because park rangers have authority, right? Is the park open or closed? Because if it's closed, you're trespassing, right?
Not federally.
All right, Tim. All right, my
Not
friend.
federally.
Tim's all over the place. We can't stay. First, it was about a woman in Texas. Then it's about Constitution. Then it's about search and seizure. Then it's a closed Idaho park. But then he says it's not federal. But you said it was Idaho. Tim's all over the place. Let's go next to our caller from the 716 area code. Who's calling today from 716?
Hey, David.
Hey, who's this?
This is Xavier from Buffalo.
Hey, Xavier, what's up?
All right, so I can't support Joe Biden. I'm sorry, but his record on segregation, the crime bill, and his allegations with Tara Reid, I can't support Biden. But I will say this: I do. Would you agree that it is the most important thing that we do is to flip the Senate? Because if you think about it, if Donald Trump gets reelected and you have a Republican Senate, that's going to be a disaster. You're going to get more terrible policies passed. If you have a Joe Biden presidency, but you have a Republican Senate, I fear that that's going to enable Biden to work with Republicans more to do like horrible things. Maybe like cut Social Security, Medicaid, because he said he is willing to put that on the table.
Right.
But I do think if you
So let's
if you were to
hold on a
have
second. Let's back up. So okay, hold on. So in the 90s, Joe Biden said he would not rule. So I don't even care about that. Like this is old stuff, but I think it's important for people to understand. When you say Joe Biden is considering cutting Social Security and Medicare, Joe Biden during it was either an interview or a debate in the 90s said he wouldn't a priori take off the table cuts to Social Security and Medicare. Joe Biden didn't propose any such cuts, and that was almost 30 years ago, and he's not talking about that now. So like we can think whatever we think about Joe Biden, but you understand that I can't let you come in and say Joe Biden is thinking about cutting Social Security and Medicare when what happened was in the 90s he said he wouldn't a priori take it off the table, but he's not advocated for it, and he certainly isn't running on that now. You know that, right?
Well, yeah, I know he's not running on that now, but it seemed like in the past he's like...
In the 90s, when he
like,
was
oh,
asked
okay to the
in a
idea.
situation, he said, I wouldn't blindly take it off the table. Now, I disagree with that position. I would say we're not cutting it. He didn't say it in the 90s, but that has nothing to do with what he's running on now. I don't want people to hear that and think the wrong thing. So here's my perspective. I don't think there's any sense in me saying it's more important that Biden beat Trump or it's more important that Democrats take the Senate. These are separate elections and they will very much go together. So, for example, in a state like Montana, he's losing, but he's polling way better than Democrats have done in the past. And the incumbent Republican senator in Montana is losing right now to Steve Bullock. So there's not really this one or the other thing, and they're going to be decided separately, although they seem to move in parallel. If Biden does really well, it's more likely that a bunch of Republican senators would lose. So I don't think it's the right approach to say it's more important to take the Senate. It's actually, these things are linked, and you get a vote for the Senate and you get a vote for president, and we can do both.
Okay.
All right, Xavier, thank you very much. Appreciate the phone call. Let's go next to our caller from the 801 area code. Who's calling today from 801? Welcome.
Hey, David. Thanks for having me. I just want to ask you, to what extent should someone tolerate the religion or the religious practices of their parents? And how should you approach a conversation with your parents if you feel like there are certain lines being crossed?
Okay, so I'm having a little bit of trouble understanding exactly what you're saying. The first part was, to what extent should you respect the religious views of your parents, or tolerate, I think was the word you used?
Yep, tolerate.
Well, I would want to know what you mean. If you're asking, do you need to be the same religion as your parents or have the same views? I think the answer is clearly no. If you're talking about, should you be respectful of your parents' views in order to maintain a friendly relationship, then that's sort of up to you and what your priorities are, right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So what was the other part of the question?
Yeah, so if there are certain practices that your parents engage in, whether it's prayer or whether it's like imposing certain beliefs, in this case, it's speaking specifically to like Christianity, how should you approach the conversation with them that their beliefs or their practices sort of make you uncomfortable or make you uneasy?
What would be the point? What would be your goal in the conversation? Let's start there.
Yeah, I guess just to be on the same page with them.
But do you want them to stop the prayer?
And so in some settings, right? So I'll give you an example. My spouse and I had a get together with a bunch of different people from my family and from their family. And at a certain point, my parents decided they were going to pray and invite everyone to do like a group prayer. And I sort of asked them not to engage in that, but they sort of did it anyways. And it just seemed like any conversation I had with them about whether or not that prayer was going to happen wasn't productive.
Right.
And I think I might have just been approaching it the wrong way. But I wanted to get your advice as
I mean, listen, here, I know friends who have experienced that situation. I have some friends who the parents, so it's a couple, the parents of one of the people are completely non-religious. The parents of the other person in the couple are very religious and often want, when everybody gets together, they want to do 30 minutes of Bible study and stuff like that. The way that it was handled there, and I can't think of any other way to do it, quite frankly, is the child of the religious parents pulled them aside and said, listen, my spouse's family is not religious. We want to have a nice time. People get uncomfortable when you want to do 30 minutes of Bible study, and it would be better for everybody if we skipped that. And they did take offense, but they accepted it, and there's no more Bible study when everybody gets together. But the thing is, that's how one set of people reacted. You know, your parents may react in a different way, so I don't know that there's one right answer here.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. Okay, cool.
Sounds like a tough one, though. I don't envy the position that you're in.
Yeah, no, I don't imagine many people would, but I definitely appreciate your advice.
All right, appreciate the phone call. Great to hear from you. Let's take a quick break. If you were holding, don't hang up, because we are going to go right back to the phones. It's going to feel like it's mere seconds. Stay with me.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show depends on the support of our viewers and listeners, and one way to keep us going is through Patreon, where you can pledge as little as $1 per month or as much as you want at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Great perks and benefits as well. Read about them.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Let's get right back to the phones at 617-830-4750. Let's go to our caller from the 718 area code. Caller from 718, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, JD from New York.
Hey, JD, what's up?
Specific question. Has the capacity of the U.S., in your opinion, to provide the opportunities for a healthy, safe, and prosperous life in the years ahead substantially diminished post-SARS-CoV-2? I ask as a well-traveled person and a first-generation American and a person of color who works remotely in IT currently, and I'm prepared to emigrate out of America after travel restrictions are lifted. Um, Separately, speaking to relatives who work in healthcare in New York and the D.C. areas, I fear that the worst of the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic here in the U.S. is ahead of us, not behind us. Hopefully you can ease some of my fears and frustrations, but thank you for everything you do, David.
Well, listen, I mean, here's the deal, JD. The pandemic itself at some point is going to pass, and there's going to be irreparable health harm that is done to what could be hundreds of thousands of people that die. We don't really know what the death toll will be, but it seems like, within a month, it could be over 100,000. And then who knows how high it's going to go in the US. Eventually, we're going to get past it and the economy will start to recover. But what we've learned from this is that even an economy that looks pretty solid, and I talked about this on yesterday's program, is pretty fragile, right? Like it's pretty damn fragile. I mean, the stock market was near record highs, unemployment near record lows. We had consumer confidence was relatively high, inflation under control, et cetera, et cetera. And in 8 weeks, we've lost 21% of the workforce. 21% of the workforce has lost their jobs. There are people without health insurance. There are people who are in food lines. So I don't know that the pandemic will actually change the reality of this fragile economy, but the pandemic has exposed how fragile even a seemingly good economy can be. And that is something that I'm guessing people are going to remember the rest of their lives.
Okay. Thank you, David.
All right. Appreciate the call. Thank you so much. Let's go next to our caller from the 757 area code. Who's calling today from 757?
Hello?
Yeah, that's you.
Hey, David, this is Aaron from Virginia.
Aaron from
I've been
Virginia.
reading an
Okay.
article.
And Aaron, let me just mention, so we're having this issue with the phone system where when people talk loud, it actually creates a paper crunching noise. And I can't control that on my end. So maybe just put the phone like a couple inches further from your face, and then I think you'll come in beautifully.
Gotcha. Is it better?
That is so much better. Thank you.
All right. I'm reading this article on Washington Post about Trump installing this Republican donor to the Postmaster General position.
Yes.
And I just have two questions. One, is there any argument that Trump has that maybe Amazon isn't paying enough for the delivery, like corporations are paying enough for delivery? Is there even a legitimate argument about that?
There's an argument that, so let me address that. Amazon makes deals with multiple carriers. So I'm not an expert on shipping and logistics, but from what I understand, Amazon, I believe Amazon in the US only uses UPS. I don't think they do FedEx, although I may be wrong. But my understanding is that in the US, Amazon cuts a deal with UPS where they are not literally paying for every package the way you or I might if we send a few packages a month. My understanding is that it's a combination of fixed fee deals plus some other amounts. So Amazon and other large shippers have always struck deals with shippers where if you only look at the per package price, it might seem like it's a loss, but you need to look at the value of the total contract. So my point is, I don't know that what Trump is saying tells us the whole picture, but I would need to investigate it more.
Okay. And just the fact having this Republican appointee in position to control people voting by mail ballot this 2020 election seems pretty scary.
Of course.
And is anyone going to do anything about this?
Yeah.
Like,
so
unfortunately, it seems pretty dangerous.
Trump fires inspectors general who are going to look into things that he doesn't want looked into. Trump bullies departments into getting rid of people that are opposed to what Donald Trump wants to do. So unfortunately, this is a situation we're between a rock and a hard place because the only solution is to remove Trump in November. And yet Donald Trump is taking steps like appointing a friendly postmaster general who may be able to assist in not having vote by mail work. So one way would be, it's going to be up to states to decide about vote by mail. You could have a state say, hey, we're going to do vote by mail. And then the postmaster general can generate a paper which says, hey, you know what? The post office would not be able to properly handle all of Florida voting by mail. And they can create all of this fear, uncertainty, and doubt to put in question whether we're going to do it. So unfortunately, our only solution is to remove Trump. And Trump is actually putting people in power who who may hamper our ability to do that? I don't have an answer. It's dystopian and nightmarish, and you're right to point it out.
It even seems like he could just, go on strike, have them go on strike, like say shut it down, and then they would.
I wouldn't put it past him.
Postal Service.
I don't know what the logistics of that would be, but I wouldn't put anything past Trump to at least attempt at this point in time. And he knows vote by mail would be terrible for him, and he's going to try to prevent it from happening, at least in swing states where it could flip the results.
Wow, pretty scary.
It is.
Yeah, that's my question. Thanks, David.
All right, appreciate the call. Thank you so much. Let me go next to Mike from Boston. Mike from Boston, we haven't heard from for a little while, I guess. What's going on with you, Mike?
Hi, David. Thanks for taking my call.
Pleasure.
I just want to respond to this and kind of get your view on it. A couple callers ago, I'm really getting sick of these delusional people out there. And some of the people on other progressive podcasts and blogs, people, like Crystal Ball on Rising, and I know he's your friend Kyle Kulinski on Secular Talk, who are just so anti-Joe Biden, and they seem to be out for blood for him. And I really can't understand why. If this crisis right now that we are going through, it does not signal to people that Trump must be removed at all costs.
Right.
You are not only irresponsible, you are borderline selfish, and not caring about the lives that are being lost.
So let's take that piece by piece. Let's take that piece by piece, Mike. So first of all, I have no idea what Crystal and Kyle have been saying. Again, I just don't watch shows. I work on my show, 12 hours a day, and then I relax with some stuff that's not political content. But so let's go through it in pieces. First of all, remove Trump at all costs. Not if you're going to replace him with something worse, right? So like I've made the calculation that Biden is better than Trump. That's why I am going to vote for Joe Biden to replace Trump. If you give me an option that's worse than Trump, then I say keep Trump because I want to do harm reduction. That part probably we agree on, right?
Well, yeah, but the only realistic choice is you're either going to...
I agree. At this point in time, these are the options. It's Joe Biden or it's Donald Trump. Now,
right.
Why would Crystal... I'm taking your word that Crystal and Kyle are very much anti-Trump, as you point out. My guess is if you ask them why, they would say that it's because maybe they don't see Biden as better than Trump, or they see Biden being elected as a path to something that doesn't fix the problem in the longer term. You'd have to ask them, right? You're asking me about stuff I haven't seen. My guess is if you ask them, they would have a different perspective about, and they would be able to articulate why they are as anti-Biden as you described them to be. I've made my view clear, which is when I look at history, I don't see accelerationist theory as having worked and accelerationist perspectives as having worked. I see we have succeeded through getting people in power who will make responsible choices to the Supreme Court, which will then uphold the improvements that are made by the people that we elect. That's what I've seen in the progressive era, the New Deal era, and the civil rights era. So that's how I have established my framework. And I think what you're pointing to is somebody who has a different framework.
I would say so, yes. But I just don't get the point in it. I don't think I look at the landscape in the country, the way that this crisis is being handled, the way that the last 3.5 years has gone, and I don't think this country can handle another 4 years of Donald Trump.
I happen to agree with you. I happen to agree with you. Listen, so everybody has to figure out what works for them. As I've said before, somebody doesn't want to vote Biden because they actually believe the country is better off with Biden losing and Trump getting 4 more years, then they shouldn't vote Biden, right? But I want everybody to be clear. And there's a contingent that I'm seeing, not Kyle and Crystal, but stuff like I'll look at my subreddit each day and I'll look at my Twitter mentions each day, where there are people who are doing an anti-Biden thing, but they're not actually saying they think Trump is better. So then it's like, well, what are you just posturing, or are you trying to get a certain reaction? Are you trying to get Joe to come beg for your vote or whatnot? Like, I don't need any of that stuff. I'm plenty busy. I'm just like, Biden's better. I'm voting for Biden.
they're mad that they didn't get their guy, and their guy was Bernie Sanders. And I was a Bernie Sanders guy.
Okay.
And I understand the disappointment.
Yeah.
But, sometimes when there's no great choice and there's no right answer, you do what you got to do and take the best option available to you is all I'm trying to say.
That's my perspective. And what I think is important to do is I don't see any benefit in going around and attacking the motives of Crystal and Kyle. Like, again, I'm going by what you're telling me, but if they've come to the conclusion that they're never voting Biden, and I'm not saying that that's what I don't know if that's what they're doing, but if they did, my instinct is to assume, again, because I know them to some degree, I assume that they've come to that conclusion through some different framework than I have, rather than they don't care about death, like you said. I mean, clearly they both care about death. I know them well enough to know they care about people dying. I'm guessing they're working with a different framework.
Right. I guess my point is that I guess what I'm trying to say is that if, in my opinion, in my view, if you really care about the well-being of this country, and you were a Bernie Sanders supporter or an Elizabeth Warren supporter, and you're looking at this election and you're just going to say, well, you know what, if I couldn't just get my guy, and if we can't have it all or nothing right now, then I don't really care what happens to the country. I'm going to vote third party or not vote at all or and do whatever. I think you're extremely off base and extremely selfish and not really caring about a lot of the suffering that's going on with some of these people right now.
Yeah. So, Mike, it sounds like your frustration is that there are people who are coming to different conclusions than you, and you're frustrated by that because for you, the conclusion you've come to is so obvious.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I was going to vote for whoever the Democratic nominee was. That's just how I went into this whole, election cycle, which was going, because I've seen what happens when you make irresponsible choices. And I just think they're being irresponsible. Thanks, David.
All right. Mike from Boston, great to hear from you. Let's see if we can check in with our caller from the 616 area code. Who is calling today from 616?
I think that's me.
Yes, it is.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, David. Thanks for choosing my number. This is Justin from Michigan.
Hey, Justin.
The West Side. It's a bit more of a technical question here, but just to jump right in, I don't recall you commenting on the Israeli-Palestinian deal of the century, quote unquote, proposed by Trump, which was largely drafted by Jared Kushner. So if you've seen the proposed map, the potential Palestinian state looks like scattered islands, more or less, within the Negev desert. And as you probably heard, Gantz and Netanyahu just recently signed an agreement to essentially annex large swaths of the West Bank, seeming in tandem with this plan, just to complete it before the 2020 election. And just sort of, or this is speculative here, but and also to sort of sweep it under the rug during the coronavirus pandemic. So my question is, what do you think of the plan? Is it in any way feasible? And isn't it sort of a slap in the face to Palestinian aspirations of a statehood along the 1967 borders? I know it's loaded, but hey, here's some foreign policy for you.
So is this, by this, when you say that this is the deal from about a year ago, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did comment on it at the time and did one or two pretty detailed clips about it. I don't have the map in front of me, but certainly I've spoken before about the importance of, having a contiguous Palestinian state. Without having all of the details refreshed right in front of me, I wouldn't be able to say anything more than what I said a year ago or when I covered it. Although what I will restate is I simply do not believe that the arbiters to a long-lasting deal in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict are going to be Benjamin Netanyahu, nor any deal in which Hamas is involved. That I've been saying that for years. I maintain that is the case. That will not be the case. That won't work. And beyond that, I haven't looked at the deal for a year, and I would check out my prior commentary on it.
Mm-hmm. Can I follow that up quickly?
Sure.
So would you then argue that any plan should begin with the Palestinian Authority, which would then be widely embraced by the Palestinian people in Gaza, which would then, in turn, I don't know, like you would see a domino effect with Hamas leadership?
What I would love to see first would be Hamas removed from power, period, before we have to have this domino effect. And again, Hamas has a stranglehold in Gaza, and I don't know that I see that happening anytime soon either.
Mm-hmm. Right. Absolutely. Well, hey, I'll definitely check out those clips. Thank you so much for your response. And yeah, I'll be calling in at some point with perhaps a few different questions for you about foreign policy. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Appreciate the phone call. Great to hear from you. I, as always, apologize to everybody I was not able to get to, but we will take calls again. We'll go to a quick break and be back with your questions after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Whether you're looking for David Pakman Show coffee for your Chemex or French press or a David Pakman Show t-shirt, it's all available on our website, shipping to anywhere in the world at davidpakman.com/gear. Don't miss the bumper stickers too. davidpakman.com/gear.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
All right, let's get right into audience questions for the week. I understand what is on people's minds, and it explains why these are the questions I've gotten. First one is, hey, David, what is the longest that the United States can realistically stay shut down because of coronavirus? So I'm going to answer the question as asked, but please understand that we never really shut down to the degree that Europe did. And when you look at, 4.8% GDP decline in Q1, that's a lot. That's crazy. But that's an economy that's mostly still open. Now, okay, the shutdowns didn't start until March. If we have a 20% decline in Q2, April, May, June, that is crazy. That's a crazy, but consider that still means 80% of the economy is still up and running. So compared to Europe, the United States restrictions have been really light. The stay-home orders have been put in place in a number of states. Essential stores are still open. For the most part, all grocery stores, hardware stores. In Massachusetts, restaurants remained open for takeout. People could go around not wearing masks outdoors and even indoors for a long time. You could go wherever you want. Parks were open. Some places have had to close parks because of people gathering. A lot of beaches remained open as long as people weren't on top of each other. In Italy, just this week, people started to be allowed to go more than 200 meters from their house, or I think in Spain it was 500 meters. We never had that in the United States, even in the strictest situations, wherever. I don't know if we would consider Michigan to have been the strictest or whatnot, but we were never really fully shut down. And a lot of what we saw in the US is really a city versus suburb, rural distinction, because I've been in Boston. Restaurants remained open for takeout, but the streets are quite empty. There's very little traffic going places. So certainly the more urban areas of the city seem noticeably empty, but a lot of the basics stayed open the entire time. Suburbs may not even have been as dramatically different. It's hard for me to say for sure. So the answers in terms of how much longer can we stay, quote, shut down. It's very clear that there is not a lot of political appetite, even in the more liberal states, to stay shut even a single day longer than public health officials say that we should. So I think we're increasingly going to start seeing two tiers. We're going to start to see places that had early hotspots and took it very seriously. New York and Massachusetts and California are the ones I'm most familiar with, that in the next 2 weeks to 4 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, are going to be able to start opening some things with caution, still with masks indoors, outdoors when you can't social distance, but there will be some opening up more than likely. Manufacturing hopefully can start to come back with people wearing masks and distancing in factories, etc. The governors will sort of figure it out. The problem is that we are starting to see rapidly rising cases in places like Florida, Georgia, Texas, and there are others, although I don't have the numbers readily sort of in my mind. And on a percentage basis, they are seeing faster and faster increases in cases. They're not going to be able to open up, or if they do, it is going to be significantly tragic. So, You have some states starting to say, we're going to start running out of unemployment insurance money. That's going to be pressure, especially for Republican governors who are very concerned with debt in this abstract sense, to try to open up. The saddest part about all of it, and ultimately these are decisions that governors will have to make, and the answer is many of them are going to start opening some things in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Sadly, if on March 5th, when we had over 200 cases, Trump had said from the federal government, I need all 50 governors to do a shelter in place, stay-at-home order. If we had done that on March 5th, we would be in really good shape right now. That's what we're seeing in other countries. South Korea took care of things despite having their first case at the same time we did. And that is the really lost opportunity that there's no way to go back and undo at this point in time. Hey, David, both Biden and Trump are older and have political problems that might prevent them from making it to November. Who are the likely Biden and Trump replacements if they don't make it to Election Day? So we'll deal with Biden first and then talk about Donald Trump. It's a little bit of a weird question, but I'll answer it. If you don't believe Joe Biden is going to make it to November, I presume you mean because of his age, because I don't really know of what else is going to knock Joe Biden out. I know that there are people saying he should resign because he's been accused of sexual assault. That's not really the way things work in the United States, right? Republican, Democrat, for better or for worse. In particular, Joe Biden's winning every national poll and even competitive in a bunch of red states that Trump won easily. You don't usually bow out when you're winning every poll. So people who are, using hashtags about drop out Biden and this sort of stuff, for me, Biden is on the ballot in November unless he's dead or in a coma by that point in time. Now, maybe there are people, again, who are thinking that the Tara Reade thing is going to make Joe Biden step back. I just think it's unrealistic. So if Joe Biden doesn't make it to November because he dies, again, I think that's really the only way that it happens. It would seem natural that it would be Bernie Sanders who would replace Joe Biden in the sense that Bernie Sanders had the second most delegates during the primary before dropping out. I think what would complicate it is if Biden chooses a running mate soon, you would have a debate. If Biden chooses a running mate and then for whatever reason cannot continue the campaign, I think you would have a fight between whether the running mate replaces Biden or whether Bernie Sanders replaces Biden. I think it would be horribly toxic and divisive and could probably end up helping Donald Trump. I hope it doesn't happen. All right. That's on the Joe Biden side. On the Trump side, again, I assume people are talking mostly because of age. Trump's not going to be removed by impeachment. He's not going to be removed by the 25th Amendment. He's not going to be arrested or anything like that. So maybe people think Trump is in his 70s and in poor health. So maybe that's what they're looking at. I think Republicans go right to Mike Pence. I don't think there's any question whatsoever. I don't think there's even much to debate. I know that the idea has been floated of maybe Trump would replace Pence for his 2020 run. Obviously, that ship has sailed. The Trump-Pence 2020 signs are everywhere. Mike Pence has been made sort of a figure, a prominent figure in the coronavirus task force, despite being a complete clown. Trump has made him a prominent figure in the briefings, et cetera. So I think it obviously goes right to Pence. Don't see it going any other way. If you disagree on either, if you disagree on what happens if Biden doesn't make it to November or if Trump doesn't make it to November, let me know. Hey, David, when will you start going to restaurants, the gym, the movies, traveling, and doing all of your normal life after coronavirus? I don't know. I've been thinking about this a lot, talking to friends and family, and I'm planning to get an antibody test next week or the week after. And it's conceivable that my behavior may be different if it turns out that I already had the virus. I think that might affect my behavior to some degree. But I'm not just thinking about myself. I'm thinking about, do I want to be seeing my parents when this starts dying down? Because if so, I probably need to do the responsible thing and not go to some of these places, particularly if I don't have the antibodies, if I want to be around my parents. So I think for me, the gym seems pretty far off. That seems like a cesspool of germs and contagion. I never go to the movies as it is. The last movie I saw was not the latest Star Wars, but the previous one is the last time I went to the movies. I think that was 3 or 4 years ago here in Boston. So I think I'm fine without going to the movies. I don't really care about the movies. For me, the big things really are seeing friends, particularly at beer gardens or going to restaurants, going to cafes, etc. I'm feeling like if they are going to start opening some of those up with reduced capacity. My favorite cafe said we're going to operate at 20% capacity, and the employees will wear masks. And it's kind of hard to have a mask on when you're eating or drinking. But I would probably go and sit with my laptop if the numbers keep declining in Massachusetts the way they have been. If in 3 weeks those places start to open, I'd probably go and sit with my laptop for 2 hours, have a coffee, then come home, wash my hands, and I think I would be comfortable with that. Travel is a real question mark. I don't know. I had a bunch of trips canceled, including I was supposed to be in LA on the Joe Rogan program last week, and I had vacations planned. I don't know when that's going to resume, but I will probably just look at, when travels down, air travel's down 95%. My sense is I'm not going to be the first person to get back on a plane. When I see the numbers recovering, particularly evaluating the cases in Massachusetts and where I would be flying to, I'll kind of make that call when it comes to it. I would love to be able to go somewhere in August. At this point, I don't know if we'll still be in wave 1 or maybe already in wave 2, or maybe things would be okay to travel. I don't know, but I'm not making any sort of bigger decisions about that right now. Curious to hear where your mind is. I know I have friends who have been traveling throughout, and I have friends who are saying they're not traveling until 2022 or going to restaurants, period, for any time in the foreseeable future. I guess I'm kind of in the middle, and I'm going to make decisions on a case-by-case basis. Right now, I'm looking to May 18 to see how much do cases hopefully keep declining in Massachusetts, and will our governor, Charlie Baker, open anything up on that date? Let me know your thoughts. We've got a fantastic bonus show for you today. Get instant access to the bonus show 2 ways. These are quick. You go to joinpacman.com and just sign up. The coupon code 2020NOW saves you 66%. If you want it, sign up in under a minute, get the bonus show. Or become a patron at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Also takes under a minute, gets you instant access to the bonus show. We'll see you then or on Monday.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.